on a Friday. Henry Turner, Whitey Gleason, Jay Johnson. We got a special guest here to tell us about the Tampa Bay Bucs. Let me just share this real quick. How close could this game be? The 49ers' average margin of, not victory, but average margin in their game so far, 3.6 points. Mm-hmm. Tampa Bay's average margin in their games is 3.
Wow.
So close games? Yeah, we think so. Let's find out here. Bucs beat writer from the Tampa Bay Times, Rick Stroud, with us. Thank you for your time, Rick. We appreciate it. Tampa Bay, like the Niners, been playing a lot of close games so far, huh?
Yeah, you could say that. Like everyone that they've played has come down to the last minute or so. They've won 4 of them in the final minute, a couple on the final play. So, I guess it's good news, bad news. You probably should be getting some separation in some of these games, but Baker Mayfield and those guys have done a terrific job in those 2-minute situations and have managed to win games late. So look, he's playing at a high level. They've got a ton of injuries like the 49ers. I mean, you look at these two teams coming in here on Sunday, and I'm not sure who's going to be available to play for either one of them, but somehow they're both 4-1, and it's a credit to their coaching staff and their front office and all of that to keep these teams afloat because they just have so many injuries.
You know what? That's almost the question I was going to ask you. I was like, seeing that both of these teams are the walking wounded, I mean, you really can't get a good grasp on, really how important is this game when you playing two teams that's playing second and third string?
Well, I think they're all important, right? I mean, you're at the top of the NFC. There is no undefeated teams right now. The Bucs are really in the most difficult part of their schedule. They've got the Detroit Lions in Detroit next. So, they're kind of navigating a tough stretch here and hoping to get some guys back. Maybe Mike Evans is back in a week, maybe Chris Godwin in a few. He was somebody that was added to the injury list this week. So, they're really thin in so many areas, and yet, they've gotten some offensive linemen back. They've managed to spackle it together, and the biggest common denominator has been just the quarterback's playing out of his mind. He's playing at the highest level I think he's probably played in his career, and the team is feeding off, that shoulder chip that he always carries around with him. So they're managing to get it done, and they've had some good drafts. They've got some good young players, and it's just kind of worked for them so far. But we all know, it's a week-to-week league. Things can change really quickly. We're only, 5 weeks into the season. This is week 6, so a lot of runway in front of us for both teams. And but I think it's a credit to, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and Jason Light and Todd Bowles to kind of keep this thing on the tracks, to be honest with you.
Rick, you're talking about Baker Mayfield, and I was going to ask you about Baker. Huge fan myself, man. He seems to be the leader in the clubhouse for MVP on many people's ballot. Just how great has he been playing? You've got an opportunity to see him up close and personal.
Yeah, well, for the 3 years that he's been here, going on 3 years, this is the best football I think he's played, and I think it's on a lot of levels. Obviously, when you can have comeback wins like that, a lot of quarterbacks are judged in those 2-minute situations. But more than that, I think he's been very intentional about protecting the football. Last year, he led the NFL in interceptions with 18. He still had 41 touchdowns and 4,500 yards passing, so he had a great year. But he was worked very hard on protecting the football. Knock on wood for him that, he could do that. And I think, he's only had 1 interception this season. And the thing that's, I think people don't understand, a couple things about Baker is just how resilient he's been throughout his career. And in many ways, he's the same guy, the same brash guy that, we talked to him the other day. They called it immature. They called it, arrogant and this and that. And now it's moxie, right? When you're winning or losing is usually what changes the narrative. And he's managed to do that. He's found a real home here. He's got a lot of good players around him when they're healthy. But he's throwing the ball exceptionally well. I mean, that last game is probably the best I've seen him throw it. He has one throw about 64 yards on a line to Mecca Bucca that was just, an absolute seed. So he's seeing the field. He's creating with his legs. He's running when he has to. But mostly he's just in complete control. And I think having continuity of the offense, not the same offensive coordinator, but the system is the same this year for 2 years in a row, which hasn't happened in his career probably ever. that certainly helped them as well.
You know, I was about to say that, you know, it's funny how you say he's been the same guy. And I was going to ask you, is it more so him or the system he's running, or is it just the front line that's holding it up, that's giving him all this time to where he can show what he can do?
Well, I think the offensive line, when they've gotten together, has given them protection, especially throwing the ball down the field like they have. They've been very successful with some explosives down the field. I think the biggest thing is, like with all these quarterbacks, and we saw it, you know, last week with Sam Darnold. I mean, that guy was on fire too, you know, and to think him and Sam were in Carolina together is pretty remarkable. But these guys have second acts in this league. You know, when you're taking number one overall and you go to a team that was 1-31, you get to the playoffs in your third year and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then things fall apart because it's a bad organization. The one thing you can say about the Bucs is that they've had continuity in the front office. You know, they did go through some coaches, obviously, but they kept most of their coaching staff when Bruce Arians retired and passed the baton to Todd Bowles. And I think, you know, look, let's not fool ourselves. What Tom Brady did for this organization and what he brought, the work ethic, there were a lot of good players here. That's why he chose to come here. But they've got some Super Bowl champions still left on this roster, and young guys that have learned from them. And like Emeka Egbuka, who's benefited from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin being in his ear. So I think all of that is to say that it's been a pretty solid organization. There are better players around Baker, and he's thrived with that sort of, really with the consistency. You know, it's just, there's no agendas. It's just about winning.
We're catching up with Rick Stroud, a Bucs beat writer for the Tampa Bay Times, getting ready for the 49ers and the Bucs. Rick, you mentioned John Lynch, and I know you've covered the Bucs for a long time. What kind of player was John Lynch there, and do you see any of the things he embodied as a player that are reflected in this 49er team that he has helped put together?
Well, he was a Hall of Fame player. That's what he was, and I think that's, you know, you start there, right? But you know, it was interesting. John had kind of an evolution in his career. You know, early when he was first here, and Tony Dungy arrived, he wasn't a starter. You know, he had to work his way into that. There was a time when he was thinking about going back to baseball, if you could believe that. I believe he threw out the first pitch in the Marlins organization ever. But he, you know, you turn on the tape, guys, you see exactly who John was. John would knock you the hell out, and I think that. The play that epitomized it for me, we were in Chicago playing at Soldier Field. It was a cold day, and his brother-in-law, John Allred, was a tight end for the Bears. And swear to God, first half, you know, the whole family's there, both sides, his wife's family, his family, and they're up in some sky suite up atop Soldier Field. And one of the early plays in that game, Allred comes across the middle, catches the ball, and John Lynch knocks him out. I mean, cold. I mean, laid him out there on Soldier Field. He was done. And, you know, I'm sure the family wasn't too happy about it, but it didn't matter with John. You know, John was there to play and play hard. And, you know, I was surprised, and I think a lot of people were disappointed when he left Tampa. They failed him on a physical because they said he had, you know, some narrowing of his neck or spine or whatever. And somehow he did pass that physical in Denver and made 4 more Pro Bowls. So he was a remarkable player. He's one of the more knowledgeable guys in this league. I'm not surprised that he's been successful there. And I know, you know, they want to get over the hump, obviously, but what they're doing this year might be the best job that Kyle and him have done, I think.
Rick, Bucky Irvin going to be out this week again. Rachaad White jumping in for him. What's expected for him? He's averaging 4 yards a carry here, $150 just about on the season. Now that he's kind of the lead back heading into this week, what can the 49ers expect?
Well, Rachaad's not Bucky Irving. He doesn't have the make you miss ability unless he's in space as a receiver. He's a better receiver. He's exceptional with his hands. And I think that, you know, they try to get him out there in the flat when they can. He's an absolutely exceptional pass protector. He does a nice job standing those guys up. And he runs hard. You know, he runs hard. He's got decent vision. He's not going to give you the explosives necessarily. But, look, this is a contract year for Rachaad. He's had to take a step back and be kind of RB2 or RB1A or whatever you want to call it. And that was humbling for him, but he's certainly motivated. and he's embracing this opportunity. And I think the other guy that didn't get many carries last week, but I'll tell you, last year we saw him, is Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker played extensively in a game last year at New Orleans and was the NFC Player of the Week. He had about 165 yards total offense. So they've still got a good stable of running backs. I think, the offensive line isn't whole yet, but it's getting there with Tristan Wirfs back at left tackle and able to move Graham Barton to center and Ben Bredesen at left guard. And I think Charlie Heck's done a decent job at right tackle. So the protection's been good. They are creating some lanes to run in. And while they'll miss Bucky, it's not all hope has failed there. They'll be able to run the football.
Rick, we appreciate your time very much and your insight. Enjoy the game. We hope to talk to you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
Rick Stroud, Bucs beat writer, Tampa Bay Times. I was going to ask him about the Heat.